After I knew my mom was asleep, I took her phone. I knew her passcode, and I started going through her messages. Sure enough, I found texts between her and this man. They were texts where they talked about how much they missed each other and how much they loved their kids. There, in between the pictures of our family, were dozens of photos of her with the other man and his kids. I clicked on the first one. They went to Disney World together. I looked at the day this was taken, and it was during the week of a big project work trip that Mom had told us about earlier. I now knew exactly where she was for that week. They were all smiling, standing in front of Cinderella's castle. The kids were wearing Mickey Mouse ears, and the man had his arm wrapped around my mom. In another photo, the little boy was on her shoulders, laughing as they watched a parade go by. There was a picture of them on the teacup ride and another of them holding giant stuffed animals, clearly having the time of their lives. I stared at the screen, feeling my eyes burn before the tears fell down. Disney World was the one place I had begged her to take us year after year. Every time, she'd given the same excuses, like we didn't have enough money or maybe we could next year when things calmed down at work, and I had believed her. I had accepted it, thinking that maybe one day we'd finally get to go just like all my friends had. But that day never came, and here I was 18 without ever going to Disney World, and she was taking her son, who looked no more than 2, there. She had chosen them over us. The tears fell down my face as I kept scrolling. I couldn't stop myself from imagining what that trip must have been like. I wondered if she ever thought of us while she was there or if she ever felt guilty when her other son called her mommy as they walked through the park. Did she ever regret not taking me instead? But those thoughts only made me angrier. Clearly, she hadn't regretted it enough to change her behavior. She'd kept it up, living this double life, taking them on the trip I'd always wanted while telling me and my dad that we just had to wait, that maybe someday we'd get to go, but someday never came. And now I knew why. I took screenshots of everything and saved them on my phone because I knew I needed proof when I talked to my dad. The next morning when he woke up, I sat him down at the kitchen table and told him everything. I showed him the screenshots, and he just broke down. He cried, asked me how long this had been going on, and asked me why she would do this. I didn't have any answers for him. I was just as shocked and hurt as he was, but he was strong. After a while, he stopped crying, and he told me that we were going to confront her together. He said she needed to face the consequences of her actions, and he wanted me by his side when she did it. That night, when my mom came home, we were waiting for her. My dad didn't waste any time. He looked her in the eye and told her to tell him the truth about the other family. She tried to deny it at first, but we both knew she was lying. So my dad showed her the screenshots, and she finally broke down. She admitted everything, how she met this man, how she started seeing him, and how it eventually led to them having kids together. She said she never wanted to hurt us, but she didn't know how to stop. She spoke about the early days of her marriage. She was young and overwhelmed by the new responsibilities that came with starting a family. The pressure of establishing herself and her career had taken a toll on her. It was at a work conference early in their marriage that she met him, Robert. He was everything she felt she wasn't at the time, carefree and fun. What started as innocent conversations soon grew into something more. At first, she convinced herself it was just a fling, but that was a lie she told herself. And once she started, it snowballed. Years passed, and the affair grew deeper and more complicated. Robert got her pregnant, and suddenly, it wasn't just about him and her anymore. She tried to rationalize it by saying she was caught up and couldn't find a way out without destroying everything. My dad and I sat there, absorbing the reality of her words. At that moment, I knew that the life we had before was over. My dad knew it too, and my mom sat there, broken by the weight of her own choices. I'm so angry at this point, but I'm also heartbroken. I told her that she needed to tell the other man the truth, that he needed to know about us. She said he didn't know anything about us. He thought she was single, but she never told him she was married. So we made her set up a time for all of us to meet. We told her that we were going to meet this other man, and she was going to tell him the truth. She tried to talk us out of it, but we were not backing down. She'd lied enough. It was time for the truth to come out. The next day, we drove to a park where my mom had arranged to meet him. My dad and I were in the car watching as she walked up to the man and the kids. She was holding the little boy, and he was laughing as she played with him. It broke my heart to see it because he had no idea what was about to happen. When we got out of the car and walked over to them, the man looked confused. He asked my mom who we were, and she just looked at the ground. My dad didn't waste any time. He told the man who we were and what was going on. The man was in shock. He couldn't believe what he was hearing, but he still remained calm. He looked at my mom, asking her if it was true, and she just nodded. He didn't cry, though. He just stood there trying to process everything. Then he said something that shocked us both. He told my mom that if she wanted to stay with him and their kids, he'd accept her as his girlfriend. My dad and I were both stunned. How could he be okay with this? But it turns out he already had some suspicions. He knew something wasn't right, but he didn't want to believe it. He said he'd stay with her because he loved her and their kids, but he didn't expect anything more from her. My dad was done at this point. He looked at my mom and said he was filing for a divorce, and that was it. We left the park, and my mom stayed behind with her other family. I haven't seen my mom much after that except in court.